Did you see those pictures yesterday? Down on the south coast, the English south coast, 66 men, women and children, mainly men, were found. One day crossing, this is in one day, crossing the English Channel in small boats and then destroying those boats, knifing those boats because otherwise, I guess their fear was that they'd be sort of pushed out to sea again, which wouldn't happen. So these small boats sort of heading for the Kent coast. One of the boats carrying 27 adults and 8 children, said the Home Office. Chris Hobbs, retired Met Police Border Control Officer. Chris, good morning to you.
Morning.
I was struck by those pictures, and the first thing I thought was that they looked, these people looked well, they looked healthy. And if it's possible, they looked kind of, smart and intelligent as well. It was just forgive me if there's any bias in that, but they looked okay, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see too much of yesterday on the television. I was actually at the protest, not protesting, but observing. So I sort of haven't seen the pictures as such.
I think people will reflect that they looked healthy and well. But the first thing that happens, Chris, is that they are checked medically, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. I think the fact they're healthy and well, the people who come across the channel tend to be those who are able to afford quite exorbitant fees, for want of a better term, to actually make the journey across Europe and then do this final leg. You're talking about thousands of pounds. So it's sort of at the upper class end, as it were, of this whole trafficking business. So that perhaps isn't necessarily a surprise, as opposed to some of the desperate people you see from, say, the African continent who are trying to get across in backs of lorries and so on and so forth. So that's not particularly a surprise. These networks that operate are quite sophisticated. And at the end of the day, they're like a business. If they're successful, if they're deemed to be successful, that will generate more business, which is
didn't our Prime Minister, didn't our Prime Minister say, we will send you back 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Our Prime Minister says lots of things, doesn't he? Yes, I mean, that's been said for a while. I think the figure is somewhere around between 60 and 70 we've sent back out of the 1,000 plus. I said 1,400, I think, is the last count that have come across.
And let me ask you this, Chris. If we see 66 people coming over in one day, and we see them landing, and we've got footage of them landing, and then they get taken away and they get assessed. How many people have arrived and we don't know where they are or who they are? I mean, how many people get in? For every one we see, how many people are getting in that we don't see?
That is the $64,000 question, I think. We don't really know, and it's not something that the government want to dwell on. We've got, obviously, people who are able to make landings on the Kent coast, but then you wonder what's happening up the east coast where there's virtually no defence. And
what's amazing is that if you go back in time, let's say over 1,000 years, to the time of the Vikings, those people would come over, they would be raiding the coast, the men would be killed, they would rape the women, they would take slaves and desecrate our churches. It was really bad, but at least we kind of knew where we stood. They were the bad guys, we were the good guys, and we would fight them back, and that was it. But now it's all been flipped upside down to where these people are allowed to legally invade. It's a legal invasion, all because of human rights. And alongside this, we are forced to pay to house these people and give them benefits whilst they are on their asylum application. And it's just insane, because for me, I would much rather you have an army of Middle Eastern, African, South Asian people. They send their best men and we send our best men and we have a battle. And if they win, they get to claim England. You might say, wow, that's a bit risky. But for me, you have to bear in mind, the Anglo-Saxons, they did conquer the original inhabitants of these islands, the kind of the pagan, the Celtic people. They conquered them, they took over, and that was it. And so I have more respect for that way of carrying out your business. What I detest is the subversive nature of this, where you have this law that is made by the UN or the EU. It's on some book in some random building somewhere. No one's ever been to the building. No one ever knows about this. No one voted for this law. It's just been made and it's being used, like I say, to justify the legal invasion. I don't like that. I'd rather have a big, fat, dirty battle, loads of people get killed, but at least we know who's best. I favour that.
There have been a couple of landings that have been detected around Dorset and Devon, because if you actually go up the channel in a larger vessel and then decant people into the smaller rubber boats and get them on the beach that way, it's very unlikely that you'll meet any law enforcement whatsoever.
Okay, so if they're not being found, if they're not being sent back, if we don't know how many people have actually arrived, what happens? What happens to those people when they come in? They've had their health checks. Are they then dispersed into the community? Is it social services that deal with our incomers?
Well, yeah, the Home Office will interview people, will give them medical checks and so on and so forth, and then they will be found accommodation while the asylum process begins, and for that the duration of the asylum process, however long that takes. So very few people will be kept in detention, only if they're perceived to be a threat to the state or got some sort of criminal record. But most people will be released, and then really it's up to them whether they continue in the asylum process, or perhaps if it's not going their way, they've got every opportunity to disappear into their own communities.
Wow. That's quite a thought, isn't it? And I hear yesterday that a dinghy with 13 men in it was returned to Calais after being spotted by a French Navy helicopter. How are the French doing? Are they actually doing something now, stopping people coming across? Because it seems like they don't want the problem on their shores.
Well, I think the figure was, for the French, the last one I saw a few days ago was about 400 that they'd actually stopped and sent back to their coastline. But of course, once they're sent back, the French won't detain them or won't put them before a court or anything like that. They will be free to try again, which is the same, of course, with people who try and jump on the backs of lorries. So if they're thwarted, then, we'll give it another go. And the French, again, will be troubled for detention space. They can't lock them all up, basically. They won't have the room. So it's really a case of trying to disrupt the traffickers, and that they're stretched right across the continent. So that, of course, is a massive task, and dare I say it, use the B word, but one probably that won't be made any easier if there is a no-deal Brexit, because we're going to be dropped out of the various organisations that combat the traffickers, Europol and the Schengen database, which is absolutely crucial. All these databases we're going to lose access to. So in fact, life could be even easier for the traffickers if it is a no-deal Brexit than it is now.
Oh, Christ, just another element. Chris, thank you very much.
So, anyway, just one last point on this story is that however bad this might sound, you have to keep in mind that a few dozen people crossing the English Channel once a week does not in any way compare to a quarter, if not a third of a million legally entering every single year. That's the main issue. This here is simply a way to distract you, so please don't be distracted. Maintain your focus. Like, dislike, subscribe, unsubscribe, please comment. Ilu Sassoon. Peace out.